Thank you again for coming. This is our fourth opioid forum, if you will, that we've had. And I think that this is going to be the best attended yet. And we've got a lot going on here tonight, and I think it's going to be a very meaningful night and certainly very emotional in certain respects. But we're very fortunate to have Governor Scott with us. And I'm not sure that I'm aware of any other recent bill signings in the county here. But again, Governor Scott is a real supporter of all of us in Lamoille County. And I appreciate him and his staff getting all of this organized so they could come here. And we've got a lot of legislators here too. I'm going to miss somebody if I try to name you all. So I'm going to turn this over to Governor Scott so that we can have the bill signing. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Roger, and thank you for having me. I'm truly humbled to be here to support this important initiative, to honor Jenna, and to support the work of my friends, Don and Greg Tatro. Thank you very much. As I look over the crowd, I'm guessing nearly everyone has felt the impact of the opioid epidemic, because in some way, it touches each and every one of us in every community and every family in Vermont. And if you don't think it has, then you just probably aren't aware of it quite yet. And I know it has, every one of us. The devastation this crisis has on families is heartbreaking. And even with the progress we've made, the tragedies we experience make that progress feel very small at times. But we must move forward, and we must persevere, because people are counting on us to continue to win this battle. And it's an uphill battle at that. The truth is, success will be counted one life, sometimes one day at a time. A young man in recovery going back to work. A mother seeing the light in the eyes of a child once thought lost forever. A community without fear of crime and violence. And one less child brought into this world affected by addiction. This will be success. Even though the outlook can sometimes look bleak, and progress too slow, what I've learned from those in treatment and recovery over the last 2 years is that we must remain optimistic. Because if there's an opportunity to get the right treatment, then there's hope. And this attitude is how we must approach this crisis. We think of the challenge as a four-legged stool: prevention, treatment, recovery, and enforcement. And the new legislation we celebrate today takes the next steps in supporting prevention, which is a long-term strategy, and treatment and recovery, which is more what we can do in the immediate time frame. While our work is far from over, Vermont has been a leader in addressing this like the public health crisis it is. And I want to thank my team, Secretary Gobet, Commissioner Levine, and especially Director Jolinda LeClaire, who has decided to step away from public service for a bit, but has been a true leader in this area for the last 2.5 years. As well, I want to thank the Opioid Coordination Council and the many lawmakers, some here tonight, whose thoughtful work and legislation have been crucial in our response. I also want to be clear. This is not, and never should be, a partisan issue, because this crisis doesn't discriminate and does not choose sides. Vermont's leadership in this area is a result of so many people over many years across various administrations and across state and local governments and private partnerships. We're truly all in this together with the same goals. Here are just a few examples of how our approach is ahead of the curve, and everyone here tonight deserves credit for their different contributions. We've made Narcan widely available to first responders, law enforcement, people with addiction, and family members of those suffering, giving many a chance they might not otherwise have had for treatment. We've aggressively used the screening, brief intervention, and navigation to services model to slow the progression of addiction. Enforcement is another important piece of the puzzle. and state, local, and federal law enforcement are working hard to identify and hold accountable the drug dealers and traffickers who take advantage of us, our children, and our communities. But at the same time, always being realistic, knowing we can't arrest our way out of this. Our courts, local law enforcement, and state's attorneys have also become important partners in addressing this epidemic as a public health issue it is. We've also made tremendous progress using MAT, which is short for medication-assisted treatment, and part of our hub-and-spoke system. And with the support of our federal partners, we established a health home approach for Vermonters suffering from addiction. Overall, Vermont's hub-and-spoke system is being used as a model by other states across the country. In fact, Congress invited me and Secretary Gobet to testify about it because we've proven it works. I'm also proud of the progress we've made in expanding recovery centers throughout the state. We now have 12 of them, offering counseling as well as services to help with housing, employment, and transportation. I can't underscore enough the importance of connecting with other people, knowing that someone is there to give those a helping hand while in recovery. Tonight, we must recommit ourselves to the important work ahead, and we must continue to work together, because in order to win this battle, we need to prioritize prevention, intervention, treatment, and recovery. On my first day in office, I signed an executive order creating the Opioid Coordination Council to break down the barriers between the many different organizations working to address the opioid crisis. Over the last 2.5 years, the council has been instrumental in making progress on this complex issue. The bill I'm signing tonight represents the next step in our efforts by consolidating the different prevention initiatives across state government to use the scarce dollars we have more effectively. In addition, this bill establishes the position of Chief Prevention Officer to be part of the agency of administration. The bottom line is, this bill will improve our long-term goal of ending the substance misuse that has wreaked havoc across our state. With that, I'd like to sign the bill at this time, but before I do that, I'd like to ask legislators and any others, the Tatros and others who want to be part of this as I sign the bill, if you want to come forward.
I think we can all get behind the tables here. Cap, you can come up as well. We had a big part of this. I'm not part of the legislature. You were. Any other former legislators? Here, come on. Well, we gather in a little tighter around the governor if we could, so. Is he blinking? This young man here is in the Leadership Council and has been working on these conditions going forward. So we're going to keep it here. I don't know if I'm Thank you. All right, so moving on with our agenda here. Thank you, Governor, and hopefully there's a seat for you somewhere around here. So, if you want to just go out back and eat with the deputies, that's all right too. So. Okay, all right. So now it's on February 15th. I don't know what time it was, but it was pretty either late at night or early in the morning. I got called to a call that as the sheriff, I've had to take several times, but I was told that Jenna Rae Tatro had passed away, and so I went down to see Greg and Don, and there's nothing in law enforcement that you can say, and it's been a very, very difficult time for everybody in this community because this has affected the whole community. So to much the credit of Greg and Dawn and Gregory and family and Barry and everybody else, we're choosing to fight back and do what we can in this community. So, and with that, I want to introduce to you Greg and Dawn.
Be a little tough. Thanks for coming. Okay. Jenna's journey with addiction began 6 years ago. Our family seemed like it was no different than any other family. Jenna grew up riding horses, skiing, family vacations, soccer, and so on. Jenna loved the outdoors, taking pictures, and she was an amazing writer. Pretty much she loved living life to the fullest. After graduating from high school, Jenna and her best friend Fiona decided to travel. They went to Greece, Germany, and Dubai, and India. Jenna loved traveling. The following fall, she started her first semester at college, focusing in the medical field. She loved learning. She had a GPA of 3.8. On Christmas Eve, well, a breakup with her boyfriend was abused her. She ended up in the ER, where she was prescribed 30 days of Oxycontin for bruises only, no broken bones. Jenna never returned to school, and this was the start of a battle that we had no idea how hard would be able to beat. It was the perfect storm. Jenna being depressed, having that addictive gene, and a 30-day supply of oxys. Jenna had even written in her journal that I was reading after she passed. At first came the kicks, the punches, followed by the sirens, the blue lights, which brought her to the ER, where she found that little pill that made everything all better. Her life was never the same, nor were ours. You see, this life of addiction not only affects the person using, but it affects the whole family. Not knowing where to turn for help and also feeling very ashamed, as it wasn't supposed to happen to families like ours. I remember the first family meeting Greg and I went to at the recovery center. I felt so ashamed, but I was so desperate for help. This is where I realized there was other families just like us struggling with addiction, and it really helped to know we were not alone. The best way I can explain our journey was like a wild roller coaster. There was always extreme highs, followed by extreme lows, and not a lot in between.
I'm just going to turn up the mic.
Okay. If your loved one that is suffering with addiction is having a great day, you are also having a great day because you feel there's hope for the recovery of this terrible disease. But as always, soon comes an extreme low, like them stealing from you, not being able to work, or even getting out of bed, and the lies and the dishonesty that you deal with on a daily basis. You know then the brain has been hijacked from this terrible drug, and you are only standing in their way to get the next fix for their survival. Being a family member of an addict was always never-ending stress and worry. Often, addicts hide their state of well-being. You never really know how they're doing, if they're sliding back in a cycle of relapse. There were times when I thought that she wasn't using, and it turns out she was. And there were other times when I thought she was doing really well, and she was found out she was getting high. Paranoia seeps in. You're always questioning to find out, unable to trust their word because they've gone back on it so many times. And as a mom, there's nothing more that you want in this world than to save your child and begin to build a new way forward with them. It's hard to navigate that world, and it consumes families. Our family world had strange people entering our house at night, frantic calls from Jenna, being in a desperate situation, continually dealing with things being stolen from our home. There was even the case when I found my daughter thrown in a ditch beside the road, discarded like someone's trash. I felt moments of true fear when I encountered organized crime and gangs from Boston, Springfield, and New York City. These people are dangerous. They're armed. They have a network of money. They have guns and drugs. They're working to rot out our neighborhoods and our community. They and their networks have taken root in our towns. I saw how Jenna got sucked into this world and how they ended up owning her. Jenna would tell me, I hate my life. I never wanted to be an addict. I can't stand looking at myself in the mirror. I can only imagine how you feel looking at me and who I've become. This is a disease that's bigger than me, Mom. And we both knew she desperately needed help. We had taken Jenna to many treatment centers, most of them out of state. Getting into a detox center in the state can be extremely difficult. Many of the times I was on the phone trying to coordinate availability, which could take days. But with an addict, you have to work with what is called a limiting stage, a short window of unusual few hours where someone is willing to seek help before withdrawal and then pull to start using overpowers them again. So a few days is often too late, and we lack a system to help support this fleeting opportunity where we can count minutes and hours, not days or weeks. We finally found a treatment center in New Hampshire where she was recovering. She was 60 days clean. She was replacing a network of crime and drug friends with a network of friends, support, and love. People would say that Jenna was the one who would always greet them at the door when they went into the treatment center. In such a short time, she helped so many others to get onto the road of recovery. She would call me every day, and she would tell me, Mom, I found peace. And she says, I never want to go back to that life. She told me, I'm going to be here for 9 months. But Mom, when I get out, she says, you and I are going to make a difference. And we're going to raise money so we can help people that can get into treatment. As she knew she was lucky to have the resources to get the help. And that was Jenna's promise. We have continued this journey now without Jenna, but her actions and visions still echo and ripple throughout those she inspired and those who continue to look for hope. Addiction is a disease, and it can be treated. It has nothing to do with failure, with sin, with weakness, or with being less than a full person. It is a time for treatment, not judgment. Let us shift as a community from despair and move toward hope, and together we can all live up to Jenna's promise and save lives. Thank you.
Well, it's a tough act to follow here. Got the governor, he's kicking it pretty hard. Now my wife is going after it, but I'll do the best I can do. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for being here tonight. I'd like to give a special thanks to you and acknowledge all the local community leaders like Sheriff Marcoux and Daniel Franklin, who work their hearts out every day for Lamoille County. I also want to thank all our family and friends here that have supported us through this trying time, and we love you guys. We also have a few current and former elected state officials here, many who have helped us through this process. That's especially the case with Bernie Jeskowitz and Dan Noyes, one Republican and one Democrat. But like us all, united in this cause. I want most especially to thank our Governor, Phil Scott, for his administration's steadfast support and for being a leader on so many levels in our state, in our country. It can be a little intimidating for people, I think, to meet someone that is a governor, but in the end, Phil Scott is a humble man who I feel I can identify with. We both had fathers who fought on D-Day. We both have run construction companies. I'm still running one. We both have great families. The governor is a father of two great daughters, and I got to be a father of an incredible daughter too. So I want to tell you a little bit about our journey today. Our fight to get our daughter back to health lasted 6 years. That battle ended February 15th. That's when Don and I found Jenna passed in our basement. Jenna went through multiple rehabs during those 6 years. It took courage for her to go to place and not know anyone, often in the throes of a painful withdrawal. Sometimes after a rehab stint, we would have our beautiful daughter back for a time. I will always cherish those memories forever. But in the end, after a while, or sometimes a very short time, she would relapse. And you would see her addiction take over, and you would feel so helpless. Sometimes when she was using, the real Jenna would disappear almost entirely, like dark clouds blotting out the sun. We knew in moments like this that the drugs had hijacked Jenna's brain and took over her life. She would lie and manipulate and steal. She'd do anything to get her next fix. It was terrible to watch. And it was at the end of one of these periods that we would lose her forever. I can remember when I was young, about Jenna's age, that was quite a while ago, watching my father call senators and representatives when some in our government were taking money from the transportation fund and moving it to the general fund. He would ask those officials if they realized what the roads would look like in 25 years. It may have not been the wrong thing for the government to do, but my father was right about the condition of our roads and bridges after 20 years. I think he had good vision, and I like to think he passed some of that to me, because I find myself asking, where will we be in 10 or 20 years? If this crisis continues, if the trend line of decline continues as it has, what happens to our population in the future we all want for our town and our state? With a population that is getting older, we are losing our youth and working class. This problem is getting worse because of how the opioid crisis has changed over the last few years. The state has taken huge strides, as Governor Scott said, in tamping down on prescribing of opiate pills, and it's important to recognize these positive steps. While pills and heroin remain an issue for us to tackle, the introduction of fentanyl, however, has changed the game. Fentanyl is an opioid that is 50 times more powerful than heroin, and it is what is being brought into our communities now. It has been called the deadliest drug to ever hit the American streets. And in a short time that it's been a preferred drug of dealers, it has caused overdoses to skyrocket in the country. Jenna is one of those lost because of this. And yet most people don't even realize what fentanyl is or the devastating, murderous role it plays in this crisis. It killed almost twice as many people as heroin did in 2017. We have an urgent need to talk about and to address the fentanyl health crisis. About 70,000 people died from synthetic opioid overdoses since 2013. That's fentanyl, not pills and not heroin. And that's not including last year or the first half of this year. In the last handful of years, more have died from this crisis than all the wars in Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq combined, right in our own streets. Law enforcement, as a result, needs all the support it can get to stop gangs from the streets of Springfield, Boston, and New York. They're trafficking heroin and fentanyl into our communities and corroding the hearts of our local towns, of our state, and other rural areas across the country. This is especially the case for people who traffic fentanyl, which may as well be a weapon of mass destruction as far as I'm concerned. And as with any weapon of destruction, those who utilize these weapons should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. If we can eliminate the use of fentanyl in our state, we will cut down overdose deaths by 3/4. These networks are setting up roots in our communities, and while we want to do everything we can to help people with the disease of addiction, we should do everything we can do to put a stop to drug gangs. Each and every person in this room can help by staying aware of your surroundings, in your neighborhoods. When you see suspicious activity, call your law enforcement and make them aware. If we all fight together, we can begin to uproot gang activity and shine a light in the dark areas of our neighborhoods. As tough and overwhelming as these problems seem, Dawn and I are doing our best to not just talk the talk, but walk the walk. And I'd like to talk a little bit about Jenna's promise. Dawn and I and our family, with Jenna's promise, hope to make a difference. We know Jenna's promise can be one of the first places in the country that can have a sober community and a health clinic working in a concerted effort together, providing a model for others to emulate across rural communities. Addiction comes in many forms, and the suffering that accompanies addiction affects the whole family and echoes through the community. Imagine a recovery community in Johnson where people can provide those suffering from addiction and in need of a pathway to a better place, an on-ramp to resuming their place as active and positive participants in our community. Imagine a future where we have succeeded in breaking down stigma, where all of us as a community no longer whisper about dependence, but can bring the crisis of addiction out into the open without embarrassment. Don and I refuse to be ashamed of our situation and our loss, and we will speak openly and loudly about this story. This is the only way we can solve the continuing struggles of this state, where individuals can shed their feelings of guilt and shame so they know they are equals, not failures. Imagine a community that has taken positive steps towards revitalization, with more addicted people off the streets and participating in our economy and helping to build up our area in a positive way. A community with more healthy population that can access health care and mental health care right down the street. A community with more jobs provided for people in town and more people spending money in our local businesses, and a community centerpiece that people in town can utilize as a gathering place for events, dinners, and fundraisers. And lastly, I ask you to imagine a place that provides hope. Hope for those who have none right now, whether they're addicted or because they struggle with depression or because they suffer from chronic health issues that aren't being addressed. Hope for an area that has fallen through the cracks when it comes to the health care and resources, and hope for a community that strains under the burden of an addiction crisis that is killing our neighbors and children. Don and I have learned these last few months that there can be no turning back. We must always look forward and do all we can to win the future for this place that her and I call home and that Jenna loves so much. I hope you'll join us in building this future. So in conclusion, I cannot emphasize enough the enormity of the challenges we must tackle or the level of the crisis that we face. This will be the sort of trial that our children and grandchildren will read about in the history books. And the question we will have to answer is, did we have the fearlessness to step up? Did we have the bravery to call a crisis a crisis? And did we treat it as such? Did we act with enough speed and pay it the attention it deserves before it's too late? There comes a point where we have to stand up, have courage, and fight the fight. Because we are not just battling for the present, we're battling for the future that's slipping away from us. To all our elected officials here, our time is now, and as a community, as a state, and as a country, we need your help. I pledge to you tonight that Don and I will give all. And I'd like to end this with a quote from, I call him my good friend because I listen to him a lot, Tom Petty, who you may not realize also died from a fentanyl overdose. His words are what I feel. You can stand me up at the gates of hell, but I won't back down. And I'll keep this world from dragging me down. I'm going to stand my ground, and I won't back down. Thank you.
So that's very, very powerful, and I thank Greg and Don so much for sharing that very, very personal tragedy that you've been through. They're going to be around in a panel here. We've got Ed Baker coming up here, and I'll tell you a little bit about him. And so what we're going to do is have a panel afterwards for questions and answers. And Greg and Don have graciously said that they would be part of that panel. So right now, and then after Ed, we're going to have Michelle Salvador up here with the Department of Health, And it's very, very important, we do this every year, that we go around the room and identify all of our partners that are involved in treatment recovery and in prevention. And it's all part of a big team if we're going to get this under control here. It's just not law enforcement, it's just not treatment, it's everybody, all of us together. So right now, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Ed Baker. Ed's a licensed alcohol and drug counselor, and he's a licensed and independent clinical social worker for over 30 years, counseling with people with substance use disorder. Equally important, he is in long-term personal recovery from addiction for about 34 years. Ed's talk is grounded in the science, experience, and compassion. And again, thank you, Ed, for being here.
Is that me? Okay, 1 second. Thank you, Roger, for your kind introduction. I'd like to thank Governor Scott for his comments and for his presence here, for his visibility here, and more so for his unequivocal and consistent support for this particular population. People with substance use disorder, people with addiction. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for listening to that little voice inside you. That little voice that said, go ahead, go to the Opioid Forum, see what it's about. Maybe you can learn something. Maybe you can get some help for yourself. Maybe you can understand what addiction is about. Maybe you can go home and help someone in your family or in your community. Thank you for listening to that little voice.
Little voice telling you, you gotta use your mic. Take it.
I'm going to listen to that little voice. It is entirely my honor to be here with you this evening. Entirely my honor. I want to first recognize that we are many in this room, and this is as it should be. And although we are many in this room, we are of one heart. This is compassion, and compassion is at the core of my talk tonight. We are joined with you. We are joined with the Tatro family in your grief and in your hope and in your commitment. I would dare say that we may be a little behind you in our courage. Make no mistake about it. We face the most pressing healthcare emergency we have seen in our country since the great flu pandemic following the First World War in the early 1900s, over 100 years ago. This is profound. We are up against something. Make no mistake about it. We are at our best when we are deeply challenged, and we are deeply challenged today. Vermonters do not leave each other behind. Vermonters do not quit. We do not give up. We band together and we craft solutions in the face of adversity. We are part of a sea change that is occurring in our culture today, a groundswell of compassion for people with addiction, their treatments, and their recovery support services. My goal tonight is to explain people with addiction. I hope to explain it in accurate terms, in understandable terms, and terms that you will remember, terms that will help you. My goal, my driving force is to help people to feel compassion for this particular population, to bust through stigma, to leave stigma behind, to feel hope and feel compassion, to approach this population with inclusiveness, support. Addiction profoundly affects the human brain. It affects the human brain in areas and in functions that are necessary to survival. Learning, memory, reward, motivation, decision-making, the ability to inhibit impulses. In other words, the entire person is affected by addiction. As I move along in my talk, I'd like you to keep three concepts, three ideas in mind. Complex, gradual, and innocent. And we'll go through all three of these. We'll begin with complex. The disease of addiction, the process of developing addiction in a person is complex. It's not simple, it's not unitary, it's different for each person. It's complex, like any other disease process. In order to understand it, we have to understand risk factors, genetic risk and environmental risk. I have a handout that you can pick up on the way out that has a bibliography that goes into this in a little more detail. But for our purposes, we've all wondered, why is it that one person is more prone to developing addiction than another? Risk factors are part of that answer. There are genetic influences that cause one person to be more vulnerable to the development of addiction than another. Similar to type 2 diabetes, similar to prostate cancer, people don't choose type 2 diabetes, people don't choose prostate cancer, people don't choose to be at risk for addiction. It is not a choice. The other area of risk factors is environmental risk, and we know a lot about this. The adverse childhood experiences study of the late 90s have shed a lot of light on the effects of what's called toxic stress on brain development in children. Children exposed to ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, multiple ACEs, are much more likely to develop addiction in life because they're prone to impulsive decision making. Tell me, does a child choose to be born into a family where there's family violence? Does a child choose to live in a neighborhood where there may be gunshots or violence? Does a child choose to be discriminated against? No. Adverse childhood experiences. Some people have both. Some people have genetic predisposition and environmental disposition. When this is combined with likely exposure to a psychoactive chemical, and we have to face it as a society, we have to face it as a culture, it's likely that a child is going to be exposed to a psychoactive chemical. We have nicotine, prevalent. We have alcohol, prevalent. And pretty soon we'll have marijuana, prevalent. 3 drugs with known addiction potential that a child is likely to be exposed to. And when you add, tragically, over the past 20 years, the way that the medical profession has been writing prescriptions for opioids, you have the likelihood of being exposed to an opioid. So when someone with pre-existing conditions is exposed to a psychoactive chemical, the result is an overvalued response to their drug effect. This is not everybody, this is people with addiction. When a person has an overvalued response to a drug effect, they tend to seek the drug. Some people are born with a deficiency in the way that they process reward. Life is kind of blah to them if they're exposed to a psychoactive chemical, and that chemical gives them the type of reward that people seek. The brain will remember that, and they will seek that chemical. Some people have inner worlds that are characterized by suffering, depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, isolation, post-traumatic stress. It's not uncommon. When a person with an inner world characterized by suffering is exposed to a psychoactive chemical, that drug effect is overvalued, and the brain remembers it, and they will seek it. This causes continued use and eventually brain adaptation on a cellular level. This is what the Tatros were referring to when they referred to hijacking. On a cellular level, neural pathways are established involving memory, learning, motivation, the ability to inhibit impulses. This is no longer a choice. The person has no choice but to follow the addiction. It's a matter of survival. At this point, external cues can set off a recurrence of use. You can have someone who's struggling with recovery, going to AA or NA or the recovery center or therapy or what have you, but their brain isn't healed yet. This is the point. It's a brain disease. On a cellular level, there hasn't been a restructuring of the brain. An external cue can set off a motivation, can set off memory, can set off compulsion. And then the front part of the brain that makes decisions, that inhibits impulses, is not healed. And the person has an impulse to use a drug and cannot stop themselves. I was a therapist for 30 years. I can't even tell you the number of stories I've heard from people with addiction who went out and sought and self-administered a drug against their own will, caught in that tractor beam, like a robot, against their own will, a victim of their own impulses. This is the power of addiction. The second concept I ask you to remember is gradual, that the process of addiction is gradual. It may seem sudden, it may surface suddenly because it's been under the surface, but it's gradual in its progression. I struggled for a long time trying to come up with a visual explanation, a visual description of this gradual sense of addiction, and I think this captures it. My fourth grade teacher used to describe it as Roy G. Biv, the color spectrum. Red, orange, yellow, blue, indigo, violet. I'll always remember that. When you look at a rainbow, this is what you see. You see these colors. And they bleed into each other. They bleed into each other so gradually. Where does red become orange? Where does orange become yellow? Very, very gradual. It's like the process of addiction. Begins very subtly, very innocently. The progress of addiction corresponds to the text on top of the spectrum. Starts with abstinence. Children are abstinent. Moves into what we call early use, which is kind of a random use. From random use, it becomes intentional. Now there's a reason. A person is seeking one drug or another for an effect or to be part of a group, to look cool, to be older, to relieve pain, whatever. It moves from intentional to pattern. And then from pattern, if the pattern of use becomes problematic, then it's problematic use. Now, we'll take alcohol, for example. Alcohol is safe to talk about. Most people will hover around this point. A lot of people drink, and it's not a problem. They use alcohol in a patterned, intentional way. It's Friday, I'm going to drink. I'm going to a party, I'm going to a bar, I'm going to socialize, I'm going to drink. It's not a problem at all. Many people do it. Some people will move from patterned use to problematic use. It's a very subtle move, just like the change in the colors on the spectrum. Very subtle move. At this point, the majority of people, what will they do? They'll move backward to intentional use. They'll get some feedback, maybe from a boss. You've been late 6 Mondays in a row. What's that about? Uh-oh, I better stop drinking on Sunday. It's a problem. Maybe it's from a loved one. I can't believe what you said the other night. You embarrassed us. Uh-oh, I better get a grip on this. Maybe it's a self-observation. Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm not going to do that again. This is a healthy brain evaluating behavior and taking steps to modify behavior. That person moves back into intentional use. This is not addiction. This is addiction. When a person moves through that process to problematic use, they get feedback from the environment, there are consequences, and they move forward into a deeper addiction and more serious consequences. And then they move forward again into even deeper addiction and more serious consequences. This is the definition of addiction: continued use despite consequences. People forget how to take care of themselves. They lose the ability to differentiate between safety and danger. This is just an example of the subtle changes between mild, moderate, and severe. I've heard people in therapy tell me, I drew a line in the sand, and I told myself, I'll never cross that line. People with addiction. When I got to that line, what did I do? I drew another line in the sand. And I said, I'll never cross that line. And then what did I do? I drew yet another line in the sand. Innocent. Innocent. I can't even tell you how many people with addiction I have spoken to. I am a person in 34 years recovery from addiction. I have never, ever met a person who has consciously chosen to live a life characterized by the symptoms associated with addiction. It has always been innocent. Addiction wears a cloak. Addiction wears a disguise. Addiction tells you something it's not. And then when it's got you, it says, I am addiction. It's extremely powerful. People with substance use disorder, people with addiction, need us to understand what's going on with them. They need us because they don't understand what's going on with them. They need us to craft solutions. They need us to craft solutions that make them comfortable seeking help. What do we do? Does anybody feel like that? Because I feel like that. What do we do? We can't really do much about genetics. Genetics are genetics. We can educate people about risk factors. We can educate ourselves about risk factors. But I would submit this idea to you, that we can shape the environment. We are the environment. It's our business, it's our duty, it's our responsibility to shape the environment in ways that welcome people with addiction, with compassion, that assure them that they're not being discriminated against, that we're not seeing them through a lens of stigma. This community here, this community in the Lamoille Valley, is quickly and very powerfully working its way toward becoming a recovery supportive community. There are people in the room, I saw Susan Bartlett a little bit early. There are people in the room who've been doing this literally for decades, my friend Michelle, others in the room. We're working toward becoming a recovery supportive community, and this is what we have to do. The Tatros put it perfectly. Our future depends on it. This last piece is on something every one of you can do every day. When you think of an advocate, you usually think of someone standing on a soapbox with a megaphone, making a big fuss. This is a way of being what I like to call a softly spoken advocate. By the conscious choice of language, we can all use language that sends the message that we care about people with substance use disorder. We care about people with addiction. We have compassion. We want to use language based in science, not in stigma. Words can dismiss. Words can demean. Words can discourage. Words can perpetuate stigma. There's no blame here. You learn what you're taught, and we've been taught the wrong language. Public information hasn't kept pace with science. Words like this we need to strike from our vocabulary. Drug abuser, dirty drug test, addict, recreational use, doctor shopping, user. These words don't get it. They don't sound compassionate. They don't reflect science. There's been research done on the word drug abuser. It elicits what's called implicit bias because the word abuser is housed unconsciously with other types of abuse. When you hear someone is a drug abuser, your response is punitive. I will punish you because you're an abuser. People who use drugs don't need to be punished. We've seen that with the war on drugs. It doesn't work. They need to be included in a compassionate way. We need to be all in, all hands on deck, exhausting resources. In the handout that we have, it's a paper I wrote called Softly Spoken Advocacy. Please pick one up, and there's additional reading. There's a bibliography included with that. This is something you can do every day. What I envision is that, we will become a force in the community. We will educate our families. We will educate our neighbors. Words can affirm. They can empower. Words can motivate. They can eliminate stigma. And when stigma is eliminated, compassion takes its place. We know this. What are the two most powerful instincts a human is born with? Preservation of self and preservation of the species. Compassion is natural. We want to feel compassion for each other. We learn to feel stigma. We need to unlearn stigma and unleash compassion. These are some words that we can use. Simply put, person-first language. So-and-so is an addict. How does that sound? It's so limiting. No, so-and-so is a person with addiction, much more compassionate. Ed is a person with substance use disorder. How does that sound? Compare it to Ed as a substance abuser. It's a whole different connotation. We want to use neutral, non-judgmental language. Drug use, not drug abuse. Non-medical use, I like to use instead of recreational use. The non-medical use of marijuana. It's not recreational. Drug misuse is a word that's gaining in popularity, another safe, neutral word. People in recovery. Recovery needs to be celebrated. I surround myself with people in recovery. I am a person in recovery. people in recovery can contribute so much to society and so much to this cause. We don't want to characterize them as on the wagon or a clean addict. It doesn't get to the truth of what's going on. People in recovery, she's a person in long-term recovery. We need to struggle with this. We need to struggle with this as a community. This is the ultimate goal of softly spoken advocacy. This is our ultimate goal as a recovery supportive community. That we will change the language, that we will use language based in science, and it will reflect what we know inside. We need to educate ourselves about the disease of addiction, the disease of substance use disorder. It's not space science. Vivek Murthy's 2016 Surgeon General's report, Facing Addiction in America, is written for people to read, not doctors, not psychiatrists, written for regular people like you and I to read. It's in my bibliography. I've read it a number of times. We need to educate ourselves. At the barbecue, we need to educate who's ever standing next to the grill getting a hamburger. We need to be out there. We need to be advocates for change. We need to step up. This causes an accurate perception of people with addiction. It's not a choice. It's not a moral failing. It's not a criminal behavior. It's a disease, a chronic disease of the brain, that it needs to be responded to with compassion. And when we as a community respond to people with addiction with compassion, they feel included. They feel important. They feel included. They don't feel shame anymore. They're more likely to say, I have a substance use disorder. I need help. Where can I go for help? And instead of languishing in the shadows, they get better. The legislature, our leaders, abandon stigma. They begin to spend resources on making programs easily accessible with low barriers. More people get help. We save lives. It begins with us. We are a recovery supportive community. Thank you.
Okay. I know which one I'm speaking into here. All right, thank you, Ed. That was very powerful. I was watching people around the room, and you had everybody's attention, and it was a great job. And I know that you could have talked for much longer, and we appreciate you kind of fitting us in. So next up, Michelle Salvatore with the Department of Health is going to talk about our prevention partners for a few minutes, and then we'll get to the panel after that. And I hope that you stick around, be thinking of some questions. Michelle.
Thanks, Roger. Thank you, Ed. Thank you, Greg and Dawn, too, for sharing with us tonight about Jenna. I think you just took my notes. Do you think I could have them back? Jeez, what do you think? I want to wing it? And thank you, Governor, for joining us here tonight and signing this important legislation. You know, I'm a little partial to prevention. My name is Michelle Salvador, and I am the Regional Substance Misuse Prevention Consultant for the Department of Health in this region. So what that means is that I work with communities and organizations and individuals to address the risks and the conditions that exist in our communities that lead toward people using and misusing substances. And we try to prevent that. So I just want to let you know I am an available resource for the community. I do community organizing work. I do prevention, program planning and consultation, presentations and training, and information and referral. So there are some resources on the back table if you'd like to get in touch with me. Tonight, I want to introduce you to a few resources that we have in our community. Our Prevention Coalition, in conjunction with the Lamoille County Sheriff's Department, created these cards a couple years ago that we keep updated. We found that people just really didn't know where to go for help in our community. And so we created what we call the Hope Card. There's one on each of your chairs, I believe. And what I want to do is introduce you to the resources on this card. But first, I'm going to invite Jessica Bickford up. She is the coordinator for our local prevention coalition, the Healthy Lamoille Valley, and she's going to share a little bit with you about what the coalition does. Jessica.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here tonight. This is just so exciting to see this room packed with people, because each of you has a circle of influence back in your homes, your neighborhoods, and by being here tonight, this is prevention, so thank you. I get the honor and the joy of coordinating Healthy Lamoille Valley, which is our substance abuse prevention coalition. And it's a group of people and organizations that come together around the goal of preventing youth substance misuse and also promoting healthy substance-free activities. And doing that, we get to do work with our school partners, we get to work with businesses and towns, and it's really exciting work because prevention doesn't happen in any one place. It happens throughout the community, and we all have a part to play. So we do have a table kind of back there behind Avram, so feel free to stop by. We have a sign up if you want to be part of our work. We'll send you a membership form, and you could say, this is where I'm passionate about, because each one of you has a passion and an interest, and you can reach, use that to help others in our community. There were a couple of quick things I want to highlight while I have the mic. Michelle mentioned the Hope Card, but there's also two other cards you have on your seat or on the back table, and these are our Ask cards. We know that when individuals are informed, they can make better choices. I go into 6th grade classrooms and we talk about that. And so one thing that we can do as each of us is inform ourselves with the questions that we should ask our doctors. The doctors have come so far in their prescribing practices, but we can be informed consumers. So what are the things you need to ask the doctors when you're getting that prescription? We also have year-round prescription drug take-back locations. I should say the back of this card, we have them. Stowe PD is in their process, so there is not one yet at Stowe, but that year-round prescription drug box is coming. But we have Copley Hospital in the hall outside their laboratory. We have Hardwick Police Department, the Lamoille County Sheriff's Department, Morristown PD, as well as coming in Stowe. But new is the Vermont Department of Health has these prescription drug mail-back envelopes. So if you know somebody who might not be able to get to one of our year-round take-back locations, grab an envelope or two off the table and bring them. And they're prepaid, and they're secure storage. So that's just one thing that we can each do is we can monitor the prescription drugs in our home and get out the unused or unwanted ones. And I'm going to hand this because I know there's lots of us.
Okay, thanks, Jessica. Next, I wanted to invite Katie Whitaker and Laura Dewey to talk a little bit about medication-based treatment services in Lamoille. Or just Katie? Oh no, here comes Laura.
So I just wanted to give an overview of the services that the medication-assisted treatment team offers in this area. The MAT team, or the medication-assisted treatment teams, have been around since 2012. And we work with all of the different primary care practices in this area. So we work with Hardwick Health Center, we work with Stowe, we work with Morrisville, we work with Cambridge, and then we work with Treatment Associates. And basically what we are here to do is to help people get into recovery. And we know and recognize that recovery looks different for every person, so we really help people with an individualized plan. whether that is a medication-assisted treatment like Suboxone or Vivitrol, or an abstinence-based, or any of the other options. We're really here to support people at where they're at and hopefully try and get them into recovery. Our team is made up of a registered nurse and a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. We have at least one of these professions in every primary care practice that prescribes Suboxone around the state, but we don't work specifically with just Suboxone patients. We really try to extend our services to everybody who's looking for treatment, and that can be from all substances, not just opioids. We also offer ongoing harm reduction, where we're really trying to meet people where they're at. At Hardwick Health Center, we're distributing fentanyl testing kits free of charge. We also distribute Narcan, and we're trying to get this model into all the different primary care practices as well as with the hospitals. We're looking at trying to create rapid access into treatment by partnering with Copley Hospital, following that model at CBMC to really get people into treatment immediately when they're seeking it. We also do counseling. We work closely with our recovery centers. We are really a community-wide program. We meet monthly with different community providers, doctors, recovery coaches, the different providers in the area to try and be really a collaborative team effort. And we are available for all of you, for family members who are seeking support and don't know where to turn, for people that are looking to get into treatment. Our number is 888-6009. Our number is on those cards, and we are available Monday through Friday to help people get into treatment.
That's perfect.
Okay. Thank you.
I really want to stress that any one of these folks that are coming up and talking, these are the places you can enter into getting some help. And anybody can call this number, anybody. If you're concerned about someone, if you're looking for assistance, you can call, and any one of these folks will be able to help you and guide you and help you along the way. Next, I wanted to introduce Mo. And Mo works at Treatment Associates, which also is a program that provides medication-based treatment in Morrisville. Here you go, Mo.
Thank you, Michelle. My full name is Mohammed John, but I'm okay. I'm really happy with just Mo. I work with Treatment Associates and INC. We're a medication-assisted program. And our goal is to strive to identify and affirm clients' strengths and accomplishments. We're committed to address community needs and working in collaboration with all the other providers in the area toward that goal. So every day we are part of the solution, and we don't walk away from it. So about us, we have Jeff Laurie is our prescriber, family nurse, practitioner. We have a team of dedicated clinicians with various backgrounds, and the idea is to create really a serene and diverse and compassionate atmosphere for therapy. We have a nurse on site. Her name is Jen Lenher. Our goal is to have all clients at risk in treatment and on medication within 48 hours of their initial call. The services we offer are just more couples and individual and family counseling related to substance abuse or mental health issues, DUI reinstatement. There is no waiting list. Patients will be treated regardless of their ability to pay, and we offer a very reasonable sliding scale for the non-insured, underinsured population. We are actively thinking about new ways to help elevate barriers to treatment, and we have a new child care center overseen by our new employee. Her name is Courtney. In addition to child care center, we have incorporated weekends groups and an evening out IOP to accommodate work schedule. We also dispense Narcan. And in our everyday work, we get so close to realizing the immensity and the complexity that we're facing as a community. that complexity and the immensity, it's just fueling us forward. We believe that treatment must be accessible to everyone in need, and we believe that recovery is possible. Thank you.
I want to welcome up Daniel Franklin. Daniel is with the North Central Vermont Recovery Center, which is a really awesome place.
Hi, everybody. What an amazing evening. It struck me all night long that it is my firm belief that together the solution is in this room. That all of us, our community partners and the people in this room, the amazing professionals that we have in this room the power, the money, and the influence to help change the trajectory of our communities. North Central Vermont Recovery Center is North Central Vermont's recovery center. We serve not only Lamoille County, but Lamoille Valley and a lot of the outlying towns. At its heart, NCVRC is a place dedicated to providing a safe, welcoming, and substance-free environment for individuals and families on their often winding path to lasting recovery from alcohol and drug addiction and many others. However, what we do and who we are is far more than just a place. NCVRC is a supportive community of peers. 5 staff members, 21 recovery coaches, more than 20 volunteers, 5 emergency department recovery coaches, and 7 board members strong. And all of our services are provided free of charge. This is possible in part due to funding from the state and federal government through VDH's Division of Alcohol and Drug Abuse Programs. Thank you, Dr. Mark Levine, the Commissioner of the Health Department, and through the legislature. To the tune of roughly 45% to go along with our own grant writing and fundraising. Thank you to the many people in this room who help us do what we do and make it possible. NCVRC is among the centers at the vanguard in the recovery world, as we're home to programs and services that seek to help whole people for their whole lives. That is to say, in all aspects of their lives, but also for their whole lives. For while many treatment modalities, incarceration, enforcement, and interventions are often ephemeral in the grand scheme of a person's life, prevention and recovery are boundless. The innumerable ways in which prevention and recovery can be experienced are not limited by how many days Medicaid or Medicare will choose to pay for, or what types of treatments they're willing to pay for. And there are no eligibility requirements to walk through our doors. There are no relationships, no bridges to authentic connection, no catalysts for trust and understanding, no acts of acceptance and non-judgment, so strong and enduring as exists when a peer works with a peer. As when a person who has lived addiction, poverty, hunger, homelessness, domestic or sexual violence, incarceration, or some other aspect of the human condition connects with another and says, I'm with you, I understand, I'm gonna help you get through this, and I will not give up on you. There are no forms of hope more powerful than the example of one who has been there and lived to help show the way for another. It is because of this organizational DNA, peer-run, free, and holistic, that we have become a beacon of hope, one that I hope will light the torches of others. This vision is reflected in the more than 111 groups, meetings, and social activities we host and provide every month. They include 12-step groups for alcohol, narcotics, and eating disorders, non-12-step groups like Smart Recovery, Refuge Recovery, and All Recovery, health and wellness programs like nutrition courses with Katie Black and UVM Extension, exercise like the Phoenix program at Green Mountain CrossFit, AccuDetox, yoga, healing arts and music groups. It's reflected in our recovery coaching program and our emergency department recovery coaching program at Copley Hospital. It's reflected in the fact that we're open every single day of the year. For while emotional and physical pain take no vacations or holidays, neither should connection. It is reflected in the hundreds of referrals and, more importantly, the connections we help make with our vital community partners. And that vision is manifest in harm reduction practices. For where there is life, there is hope. And when there is life and hope, there can be recovery. And to that point, we partner with Vermont Cares to provide harm reduction services on the first Monday of every month. And we also have Narcan in the back there. If you'd like to get some from us, you can get it anytime from us for free. Most importantly, our holistic, inclusive, collaborative model is working qualitatively and quantitatively. Since the beginning of 2017, we've received nearly 20,000 visits and a conservative 550 first-time utilizers of our center in the third least populous county in the state. In the months of April and May, we had nearly twice as many new visitors as any other single months in recorded history. Since the beginning of 2016, our recovery coaches have logged over 69,000 minutes of recovery coaching. That included 26,600 in 2018. And there's another outcomes-based way to look at the effect of such services on the people and the families and the communities we serve. And this really touches on the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars that we save the system, and how we have a ripple effect by helping one person or one family or one community. We have a person at NCVRC who's embedded with a lot of our community partners, treatment associates with the MAT team and so forth. Her name is Megan Dorsey. She's sitting over there somewhere if you can. Yeah, there she is, right in the front zone. And I want to highlight this because she's emblematic of everything that we do, of the effect that we can have. So Megan has to conduct intakes with people with opioid use disorders, people on medication-assisted treatment. And then she does 6-month follow-ups, and here's what happens. 69% of the individuals served sustained or achieved complete abstinence from the drug or drugs of choice. 96% achieved abstinence from opiate use. The number of people with full-time employment increased from 25 to 31%, and part-time employment increased from 15 to 22%. The number of people owning or renting a home increased from 60 to 79%, while the number of people homeless or living in shelters decreased from 6 to 4%. And there was a 75% decrease in the number of people engaging in criminal activity. This is a microcosm of how powerful recovery centers and peer connection can be, of how good an investment they are for this and so many these and so many other reasons. Megan is one of our 21 recovery coaches and more than 50 people in the NCVRC family, but we'd be nothing if it weren't for all the other people in this room who help us do what we do and who we are grateful to work with. And so I simply say that together we can make a difference in our communities. Together we will tackle this crisis in all aspects of people's lives, in their whole lives, in the whole families, and in the whole communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, are you free next week, Daniel? Daniel, are you free next week? I could come over to the center, have a bag of popcorn, we could talk about what 2 minutes really is. Okay, thanks. All kidding aside, former Senator Susan Bartlett, where is she? I just want to acknowledge her because it was, I don't even remember how long ago it was, huh, Ed? And she called us up and she said, let's have a meeting. Let's talk about what we're going to do about our substance use problem in Lamoille. And I remember Ed sitting at the table saying, we need a recovery center. Can you find us some money for a recovery center? And she did, so thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Levine, for continuing with that support over all these years. I didn't happen to notice whether anyone came in from Lamoille County Mental Health. Okay, Michael, would you just tell folks briefly about Lamoille County Mental Health? Briefly. Don't follow Daniel's lead.
I'm Michael Hartman from the agency that she just spoke of. and we'll say it again, take up time, but I want to mostly endorse what you just heard from the past few speakers in terms of our role is not so directly in terms of substance use help for people as much as it is to try to help everybody in the families, everybody in the community around the issues that often impact people who have problems with using. And we are hoping that we can continue to build a stronger network with treatment associates and behavioral health and wellness, other players in the community, the recovery centers, and we're trying to make sure that we end up being a good key member of that. So we have a 24-hour crisis service to help folks out as best we can, and I'm going to turn it back over to Roger.
Thank you. If I could have the panelists come up to the table, please. So we're at the point in the evening where we're going to have people come and sit down here and answer questions. And we're relatively on time, believe it or not, with as much as what we've got going on here. And of course, the content is much more important than the time. So, okay.